As early as 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat. We mustn't kid ourselves into thinking that the communists have placed their agitators only into the black communities. They're working both sides of the street. They want hatred, violence, and bloodshed between the races, and they don't care how they get it or whom they use, even children if necessary. Here is a book that I think ought to be in every home library. It's entitled Color, Communism, and Common Sense by Manning Johnson. He joined the party as a young man because he honestly believed that the communists were trying to improve the conditions of his people. He was a dedicated communist, and eventually he rose to one of the highest ranks. But after many years, he discovered that instead they were merely planning to use his people in a bloody revolution to destroy America. And when he woke up to this, he dropped out of the party and devoted the rest of his life trying to alert his fellow citizens of all races to the true nature of the Communist Party as he knew it to be from the inside.
What do you make of what Trump has said about diversity, equity and inclusion policies? He's basically suggested that they should be scrapped.
They should be scrapped, yeah. Diversity, equity and inclusion are three wonderful sounding words that are in fact a scheme to do the exact opposite. It's to divide and it's to create inequality. It's to revive racism, but this time against white people. It's all based on this idea that there's an oppressor and oppressed. It's what I call neo-communism, because the communism before 1989 failed. It was centered around class and economic inequality. But this DEI scheme is based on race and identity politics. And these things are terrible, and we've seen the outcome of that. So for the Trump administration to go out and say, let's get rid of this, I'm very much in favor of that.
Every now and then, for the past couple of years, I've been thinking about that 4chan post where a guy describes what it was like growing up in America in the 90s and 2000s. I remember that time period too. I mean, I was there. I went through all my teenage years in the US. What this guy talks about in this post is real. That's how we all felt. Moving on from racism. The love, tolerance, and acceptance movement began with the boomer summer of love. Then moved to the Gen X apathetic grunge and punk rock era, and finally it landed on us, the millennials. But if the boomers fought for it and Gen X tried to implement these ideas, by the time it was the turn of the millennials, this new racial egalitarian zeitgeist movement was the status quo. I remember being in middle school and no one ever really saw race or skin color, and I was in a majorly white state. I didn't even speak English back then, and yet none of the white kids ever treated me differently. As a matter of fact, they were all very welcoming. I never saw violence in school, just kids hanging out with each other, pranking, maybe horseplaying a little bit. No one had smartphones back then, so we were all just living in the moment. Now, before I continue, there's gonna be people calling me a coon, race traitor, or similar shit for praising white societies. But it's true. Living among whites is great. I can list down why that is, but it's just the general truth. This isn't me kissing white people's ass. If you doubt me, watch my content. Generally speaking, I call whites hypocritical, pussies, and liars on almost every one of my videos, especially when I talk about white liberals. But I don't do this out of hatred, but because I want to highlight the faults in the systems white people have created, expanded, and maintained for generations, because they're good, and I want them to stop giving it away to opportunists that do nothing but waste their generational efforts. So yeah, school in the US was really nice. Really nice. I'll never forget that experience. Like the 4chan post said, it really felt like race as a concept didn't exist. People were beyond that, and at such a young age too. I can't say the same thing about my country at all, which is why my experience in middle white America was such a cultural shock to me. I won't name exactly where I come from, perhaps some of you can already guess, but there was a lot of crime and violence where I'm from. It's basically a third world shithole. It still is, and it will always be. Nothing has really changed since I left. The worst treatment I've ever received in real life has come from my own people. And if you ask anyone from any third world country, they will probably answer with similar anecdotes. White people are completely unaware of this, by the way, no matter how you try to explain it. People that grew up in majority white countries or regions, whether they are native whites or second generation immigrants, are simply oblivious. It's like trying to explain colors to someone born blind. They simply can't understand it because they've never experienced it, right? The post-racial world white people achieve in their own communities was so effective that the average white person is by default a massive open-minded liberal. Even far-right extremists, talk to any of them. In their hearts, they still have this deep respect for humanity, an admiration of some sort. They have moral human values. Their ideas, even at their political extremes, don't involve real human suffering. If you don't believe me, check out how countries like Qatar or the UAE treat their immigration populations. Literal human slavery in 2025. So then, there are motherfuckers like me who come over to them to explain how raw and cruel our lives have been growing up in non-white countries. And to them, the whites, it's like they're listening to the plot of a movie. They cannot fathom human cruelty outside of fiction, because the world they grew up in, the one their ancestors built, was simply so safe and sweet that it lacked most of the dangers that come with high levels of crime. So that's what I'm gonna try to explain here, to an extent. And also why the inherent white guilt that comes from the liberal mindset is dying out, and why that is a good thing. In case you've been living under a rock or you're not from America, about a month ago, a white kid from Texas, Austin Metcalf, was violently murdered by a black kid, Carmelo Anthony, who stabbed him in the heart during a sports event they were both competing in. The reason? This kid right here, Carmelo, was sitting inside a tent that belonged to the opposing team. And when he was told twice to leave by Austin, his response was to grab a knife and stab him in the chest. Basically, to those of us that are already familiar with the nature of blacks, this was a textbook nigga moment. So Carmelo was arrested, taken to custody, and allegedly asked while handcuffed if his case could be considered self-defense. Really, nigga? You stab someone in the chest and the first thing you ask is if you're gonna get a free jail card? Bury this fucker under the prison. Anyway, the case develops, the media picks up on it, and so does the internet. And if you're not familiar with how this kind of news is treated in popular media, there is a clear racial bias. For example, if there's a shooting and if the shooter isn't white, the headlines will never mention the race of the shooter. I mean, looking at the Wikipedia article of the murder of this kid, Carmelo isn't mentioned even once by name in the whole article. He doesn't have a page either. On the other hand, if you check out George Floyd's Wikipedia page, you can find Derek Chauvin's name and link to his own article right at the start, where you can read all of his dirty laundry together with his mugshot from prison. So if you want to find some measure of raw truth, you gotta use social media these days. But together with that comes people's opinions, which can be interesting to hear sometimes. This case is an example. White people online have been expressing their outrage at the whole case revolving around the murder of Austin Metcalf. And for good reason. I mean, the father of this deceased kid comes to the public to share his thoughts on his own son being murdered. And one of the things he mentions very passionately was a reminder for people to not see race in the whole matter. Really, fucker? Your son got stabbed in the heart. His body is still warm, and you're concerned that people online are going to be racist against the killer? White liberals are fucking insane. Anyway, this was just the start of this absolute shit show. Finally, Carmelo goes to trial, pleads not guilty, even though he's on video record saying the exact opposite, and the judge, a fat black woman, of course, lowered his bond from $1 million to $250,000. Carmelo's family goes on social media, the black community picks up on the case, and quickly raises $500,000 in donations online for the niglet, who gets to walk free from stabbing another 17-year-old in the heart, plus $250,000 richer. Why the fuck is anyone surprised white people are starting to finally wake up? Like, come on, man. These people, these communities of black social justice warriors are online day and night saying explicitly how they hate white people with complete impunity. They never get censored, they never get cancelled, no arrests. They can simply say shit like this and walk away free. You deserve what you tolerate. And I'm glad whites are finally starting to wake up. And I don't care if I sound paranoid. This is yet another case of Marxists and communists in action. The hyper-focus on racial division and racial tensions in America is a strategic tool the Marxist communist regime uses to gain control over the disenfranchised masses. The neo-Marxist groups you see today are carrying over the same tactics, the same narratives, to convince and manipulate blacks and other minorities that whites are the devil, oppressors, tyrants that must be defeated. Anyone that goes to college will absorb this message one way or another. They may rebrand it critical race theory today. Tomorrow it will be something else that sounds just as appealing to the wannabe revolutionary spirit of the youth. But either way, it will go unchallenged behind the walls of these educational institutions. And that's the point. The goal is indoctrination through education. It's a slow process, but once it takes firm root in the mind of the impressionable youth, it's almost impossible to get rid of it. It destroys people, families, relationships. Like a parasite, it takes complete control of its host for the purpose of survival. So the only way for the average white to get rid of this bug, that is the parasitic ideology of open-mindedness from the Marxist communist revolutionary spirit, the one they've been taught from birth at this point, is absolute and total shock. Whites need to feel the oppressive boots from these movements. Movements that literally want them dead, for them to start taking action and shed whatever feelings of white guilt they have left. And this is where we are today. We have this white lady over here being an absolute legend, dropping M-bombs to defend her child and property, being defamed and doxxed all over social media, and yet she still doesn't give a fuck. Moreover, she goes to set up a crowdfund on Gives and Go, where at the time of this video she's at a whopping $500,000. This is a clear middle finger from whites to a world that wants to suppress and discriminate against them. A world that for a while now has run a propaganda machine and policy rules aimed at defaming their names and demoralizing their will. Let's be honest, blacks in America are beyond redemption at this point. It's painful to admit it, but it's the truth. If there are people making a scene, attacking strangers in public, or being loud and disruptive, you can almost guarantee it's gonna be a black person. I have so many friends in the States that all have some kind of story involving black people committing a crime. This is no surprise to anyone born in a third world country, along with other black people. This low-life behavior is universal. They are only tolerated in white countries. Whites are the only ones that will try to justify such behavior. And blacks know this, which is why every single time they are caught committing a crime, black people will shamelessly lie like the devil. Reminds me of this viral video from a police car ramming a V6 from behind while on the highway. The part that went viral is where after being rammed off the road, the black guy driving the car says, "Why will I run away on a V6?" And he says it in a way that's so convincing. The clip went viral everywhere under the title, "Police paid the wrong suspect." And of course, they didn't include the entire chase, where the dude is actually dangerously speeding to run away from the cops. The popular press and social media love black victimhood, to the point they will side with black people right away after watching one single viral clip on the internet, before having the full context or information. And like I said, black people know this, so they will take any chance they have to constantly lie through their teeth. I mean, sometimes it works. People do manage to exploit the system all the time, so most of them will take their chances, even if that's at the expense of ruining the rest of the black community's reputation. That's a good summary of most blacks in America. They don't give a fuck about anyone but themselves. They grow up chasing status and street rap, whatever the fuck that means. It's third world behavior. Get rich or die trying. I should know, that's where I grew up. Everyone is out for themselves, hustling some bullshit. Drugs, counterfeit items, stealing, pimping. It's madness. It's fucking Gomorrah. Being born in America or Europe is like winning a lottery ticket. It's such a massive advantage in life, it's not even funny. And yet, these people ruin it for themselves over and over. It's all forgiven and funded by liberal whites, of course, who think that by muddling numbers and statistics, they will somehow soften the blow that's coming down on blacks and other minorities. So that's all you need to know. If terrible things happen to white people, no one gives a shit. Look, I'm not here advocating for a race war or any of that stuff. But at the rate things have been going for generations at this point, where white liberals hungry for revolution keep poking at historical grievances of ethnic groups all over the world to pit them against America, that's where things are gonna go. And it's not gonna be nice if, hypothetically speaking, there is a race war and whites are ultimately defeated. The world is gonna be hell for black people. You need to understand this. Nobody likes black people outside of white countries. America's biggest competitors, Russia, China, India, all of these countries have only ever invested in Africa purely to exploit it in the most parasitic way possible. I'm not saying whites have never done that, but they've stopped for a long while at this point. Moreover, they've donated $1.2 trillion trying to uplift Africa. The treatment of blacks across the world in non-white countries is miserable. You can go to China, you can go to India, or an Arab country of your choice. They will despise you for your skin color, your hair. You will never fit in with them. They will call you the N-word in their particular languages with complete impunity because there's no hate speech over there you can appeal to. They don't give a fuck. They are the same countries that still have slavery to this day in 2025. And that's exactly how they will treat you if you keep fucking up what you have right now. Blacks in America have something really, really good right now. Hanging by a thread. Something that they keep fucking up. Every lie, every crime, every hypocrisy is one step closer to losing it. And you don't want to lose it because the world won't be as kind and merciful as the people that are tolerating your bullshit right now. Anyway, that's all I gotta say. Thanks for listening. Bye.